I guess it started early for me. Look at that. That's what you call Flintstone powered. And of course, the one on the right. You can see the anticipation. The coming gearhead. Finally, my teenage years grown up in Silver Lake, Glendale area. Here I am with my good friends from our neighborhood. They're all there to help me out. This is how I started. Of course, the usual Ford and Chevy, but mostly Mustangs, Ford Fox bodies, LA street racers, running hard, turbo, street cars. Eventually stuff got serious, so there we go. Racing for Ford Motorsports through Kaufman Products. Then the 5.0 revolution was rolling pretty doggone big. And that's my car on the right. And the other road racing cars of Kaufman Products, sponsored by Ford Motorsports. Of course, me at Palmdale breaking in the new 347 engine I just put together with the then experimental prototype trick flow twisted wedge heads. We got it working this time and made pretty good power. For a shootout at sundown, right there at Bakersfield, this is the heyday of the 5.0 versus Grand National through the 90s that started the new muscle car revolution. One and done. Here with Larry Knapp and Irwin. Several TV appearances that we've done through the years. And all through that Mustang craziness, helped out with a book by Isaac Martin for HP Books. Everybody wanted to know what is going on with this new Mustangs and their Windsor engines. And here's one of the books I was involved with. Our 5.0, sponsored by Storm & Norman, Pro Mustang, with the official program of the Fun Ford Weekend, where I won a bunch of races here on the West Coast. First 10, 9-second pass, highest mile an hour for the event, and of course winning the race. All the races on the West Coast. Eventually I end up driving the U.S. Army race car, doing break-in passes at Irwindale Speedway. Written all over this car are the names of all the soldiers that passed on in the War on Terror. Much respect. Really got me thinking, coming from a family of military servicemen. This was a lot of pride to drive this car. Today we'll bounce from street to racing cylinder heads. And behind me is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many is that? Yeah. 5 of, I feel, the best high port heads in the industry for a small block Ford. Now, I didn't include the AFR or the Brodix regular standard port configuration. These are all high port. They require different manifold. They require different header. This is not the standard production-based cylinder head. Anyway, this is just an opinion. Some people will probably not agree with what I say. I have a lot of experience with these cylinder heads, each and every one of them. Now, if you talk all out, these are all production castings. They're not billet type heads like the Hemi I showed, but ultimately the one that for me is the best is not even here. Okay, we have 5 of the best mass-produced cylinder head, cast, not billet. Now, when we look at through the years, when I first dealt with this one here, the C3L or C3 Yates, I was amazed that I ran 930 at that point in time, and thinking that it would flow big time like 340, 360. This is November 25, 30 years ago. I would expected this to flow in the 340, 360 range, which was big at that time. I was surprised when it only flowed 283 to be exact, so let's just run it off to 285.
And when I experienced that, I was really confused because everybody at that point in time think flow, flow, flow. Now I'm dealing with a combustion chamber that is 40 cc as opposed to the traditional 64 or larger 72, 76 cc Ford and big block, Ford and small block Chevy heads at that particular time. They would flow a lot more. But anyway, there it is. 40 cc chamber, it blew my mind why that is. And I didn't have an appreciation before about combustion efficiency. The smaller chamber contains more of the heat within its small volume, as opposed to a big chamber. It blows the heat all over, so you don't harness the content or the heat energy to make horsepower. You basically throw it all over the place around the combustion chamber into the cooling system, and so it's really very inefficient. The reflected energy from combustion that is isolated at a smaller volume produce the power that, even though I didn't have the should we say, airflow, an impressive airflow number, it still produced impressive numbers for the racetrack. So sometimes that really opened my mind and say, it's not all about flow, it's a combination of combustion chamber and intake flow. If you're twisted so much, a lot of small chamber, hardly any flow, which is this, it'll run okay. All right. Eventually, when I pick this up to about, I figured 345, 350 CFM, then that's when the car started running in a flat 9 high 8s. Okay, and I could not have done that with just chamber size. I have to have some kind of flow to bring in towards the combustion chamber to be combusted properly. You have to have a certain amount of volume needed. Next is the Blue Thunder. I have this according to what I feel is the best configuration. Now, if you notice, I have plates on this thing, intake port plates. I did this to raise and kick up the intake port to within close to ½ an inch from standard height. And I fill with epoxy the floor. If you notice, the C3 is high compared to the standard factory cylinder head, which is right here. To this thing, it's plated about ½ an inch higher. Okay. Now on the Blue Thunder, you have 2 castings. The other one allows more room to kick it all up, and I think that's a later casting numbers that they have. Next one here is the Brodix, what I run with our partnership with Brad Udell, Dana Sniff, and of course the Team USA, Udell, Sniff, and Alameda. So what a fancy name. But anyway, this is what we run, a Brodix. And if you notice, it is fairly, I don't know who's higher. Let me see who's higher between these two. Wow. The Blue Thunder is higher. Look at that. Much higher. Okay. The Blue Thunder is much higher, and at the same time, because it's much modified anyway. It's basically the same height. So here we are. It has a pretty big valve. You can put a 220 here, easy. And the flow here is what I've seen with the Yates. Well, that's not another one to get ahead. Then we have the Pro Kings. There's an inline arrangement, and then of course you can easily make over 1,000 horsepower NA with this thing. Of course, you have to have RPM, and then the SC1. This is higher by ½ an inch, I feel, I think. You see? 1, 2. It's higher by 200ths. 200ths of an inch. That is significant. And if you have a port angle that's high, it hits the back of the valve. Okay, it's more of a straight shot. In fact, the best port really is a straight tube going down, but how do you put a valve spring in it, and how do you put a guide and everything if it's straight down? Of course, you're gonna have to come in the side with some kind of port support there. And this one here, they'll flow up to 480. That's very impressive. And finally, the SC1. This is also impressive. Why do I have this too? Not reverse, you also heard me say high port is better than a lower port. Well, again, it's the combustion chamber. Combustion chamber here is small. Combustion chamber here is somewhat big. So whatever flow potential it's got because of the high port is negated by the fact that this has a smaller combustion chamber. Now let's twist this around. Here we are, the tail of the tape. They all can sport big intake valves. And if you notice, the exhaust valves are all shrouded on one side. And that's really no big deal, it's under pressure. And it shows the cylinder head people's casting or their mindset to keep the biggest intake valve that you can put in there, and thereby compromising the exhaust diameter. Before it was normal to get 1.625 oversized exhaust valve for the small block Chevy and the Fords, and they were following the Chevy valve size. And as far as turbo cars, nitrous or blown small block, they have 1.65. That's great, but today with a high port angle, they flow more even with a 1.60. Some, like the Glidden head, I think they're a 1.58 or the smallest 1.56. So here we are, 40 cc. This is like 50 cc on the Blue Thunder. This is the power there. This is much deeper, as you can tell. Okay, but I couldn't put any more bigger valves until, except if I move the guide further away from the exhaust, but that takes a lot of work and of course expense. This one here, 225 intake valve is easy on the Blue Thunder. But the biggest drawback, the Blue Thunder is nothing but a glorified Cleveland head. That's why the chamber's deep. Cleveland layout, impressive nevertheless. But what you're looking at as the combustion chamber is 10 cc bigger than a comparable Yates. Now, what I have here is, okay, now what I have here is the Brodix needles. If you notice, it's also small, roughly about 50 cc. Very impressive. Flow-wise, I get roughly 370, 385 on a small chamber. Good size port, not too big. Here on the Blue Thunder, this particular one, Irwin's heads and Huey's, I pull about 415, 420. And I know a lot of people I've seen out there, they go, well, out of the box, just with a port cleanup and valve job, you can flow 400 CFM. No, sir, it does not. Okay, you're stuck more in the 340, 350 range, which is still good, but not anywhere close. It takes more than a sand roll and a trick valve job to get it to the 400 range. Okay, and I got that because I don't want too big. We can all flow real good by making it large. Okay, not big, large. You'll get big volume, big numbers, but I'm not into that. I like good size port that'll flow. So I have velocity, which is just important. The velocity is there. If there's port velocity, when the intake valve closes, it's able to recharge itself or pack it or recover. Okay, port recovery, when the valve closes, everything stacks up right again to the intake port and is ready for the next intake valve opening. All that flow is stacked up into the port. Okay? Now, the Brodix, small chamber, like that, but it's somewhat more like an incline. When you look at it, the Brodix is just a little bit of rotation. Again, not that much. Functions like a big block Chevy. flows like a big block Chevy. This one here is at 435, at 950, okay? And it flows all the way to an inch. Again, this is very impressive. And then we're looking at the monster here. The Glidden, this is the Glidden Victor 2, okay, by Edelbrock. The Pro King's the same way. Sorry, I refer to it as Pro King, they look so much alike. The Pro King and the Glidden Victor, I'd say, are pretty much on the same level. Very impressive, okay. And remember, that's why we don't have a cap angle on the valve, because at high RPM you want the lifter, push rod, and rocker arm to be all in a straight line where they're lifting. Because if you have a push rod that's tilted because of a rocker arm and the canted valve layout, it's pushing, you know, it wants to do this, okay? There's some sideways motion there, which at high RPM with the spring pressures we're running, you know, I got 1,100 pounds, 1,000 pounds spring pressure. When you have a little bit of canted valve like you have with the Blue Thunder, you will have that wasted motion, and it takes power to try to untwist itself like that, you know. And you have flexing and everything, side loading on the valve train. With the Pro King and the Glidden Victors, Victor 2, this is straight inline, works great. We could get up to 480 CFM at 28 with this. And of course, the SC1. You can also get the same numbers, because when you look at this is rotated as opposed to that. Now, why do I say this is equal? This flows a lot, but again, look how shallow this chamber. I think this is 35 cc combustion chamber. You can see how shallow it is. Here you see a lot of depth, okay? And here we have that shallow combustion chamber for efficiency and of course for power. I would rate these two almost equal, okay? And I've seen both big numbers with this, so I guess it depends on the guy's choice or where he thinks he could really put the numbers down and how much horsepower they can make out of any given combination. But this is good stuff. Now let's look at the exhaust. Now we are here. High port exhaust works great, kind of a square. Same thing with the Blue Thunder. One thing with the Blue Thunder, when I first started working on those things, I was in shock when I found out on my bench right here, my SF-110, trusty old beast there. I got my numbers, I was going, wow, 900 lift, I was flowing 300. I couldn't believe it, okay? This is years ago. At that time, I had a 175 exhaust. I will never do that again with a Blue Thunder. I'll stay with a 160 like the rest of these guys. 300. So what I did was I changed the rocker ratio on Irwin and Hughes and dropped the lift from like high 8s, okay, to basically 800 lift, and without the car slowing down. And they got close to 900 lift, and with an 800, 100 thousandths less lift on the exhaust, no power loss, okay? In fact, it had a stronger mid-range as well. So beware of the exhaust. Here you go. So that's a Blue Thunder. This one here is a Brodix. It's higher than the Blue Thunder. Blue Thunder higher than the C38s. This one you can get 260, 270 rather easily. With a 160. Very impressive numbers. All right. So here you're looking at the Glidden Victor, just like the Pro King. Not that big, but they flow equal to that. All right. So it's kind of tricky, because remember, this is a long exhaust port, that's a short port. When you put an extension pipe here, okay, and they pretty much flow equal. This one, ask us if we don't run a pipe, of course, this is going to flow pretty darn good, because it's a longer, this is more cut. All right, just like when you follow the LS head, the exhaust port. Might not be as suppressive as the Ford, like here or right here, because the port is shorter. And the only way you can get an equal flow reaction or reading is to make their length the same, or just put a header pipe stretching 6 inches or 8 inches and flow it on the bench, and then you'll get an equal number. Because flowing it out like this without a pipe, and then you flow that, it's almost got a half a pipe or a quarter pipe, it will flow better. Okay, so then get full. Run an extension pipe on here, the LS head or the Pro King, and run an extension pipe, maybe a little bit shorter on the Brodix or the SC1. This guy here, same thing, 270, 265. You can force it to go higher than that, but what's the use? You don't need it to go much higher. So, if you look at that, that's very high. Let's see, a high port, SC1. Yep, about half an inch taller, you know, so and we look at this guy, not really fair, but that's what it's telling me right now, is that this is really pointing straight up, okay? This is about, oh my God, 3/4 of an inch taller. Remember, when the port bends, like the Cleveland, the exhaust on the Cleveland, they are big and wide, because if you don't have the height, you got to make it wider towards the bend, and ends up with a big exhaust port. The taller the port becomes, you stand it up, okay? This high port, they come out like this, but now they're coming out this way. You can actually make the diameter smaller and flow just as smaller, just as good. And this is about, well, let's see that again. Man, I'm getting all, I keep repeating this thing. Oh my God. Over an inch taller on the floor. So this is telling me that you don't need to be as big here to get the same amount of volume. And I like that, because when you have real fast exhaust velocity, it's also reflected on the intake. Once the exhaust valve starts to close, the intake valve starts to open, you got excellent velocity. It takes a big yank, okay? Plus the fact that when the port's not too big because it's high, the port recovery is quick. As soon as the valve closes, the incoming air speed is quick, not too fast now. They stack up on top of the valve. So when the intake valve opens up, and at that point in time, the overlap, the exhaust valve is closing, it takes a big pull. That's why this bad boy responds really good. Even though the chamber is a little bit on the larger side compared to the Yates SC1. This may have a better combustion chamber, but this exhaust signal here is pretty much, I think, superior. And then when you look at the combustion chamber, both of them, what this one gains in volume, or lesser volume, this one gains in exhaust pull, due to the fact that it's very tall. Now just look at the top here, and the valve train and everything. Talking about musical heads, huh? These guys require ZELLE TND, custom-made valve train. Look at that, inline, all right? This is a little bit, that's really like the twisted wedge, rotated, but this guy, perhaps, Pro King and the Glen Victor are, I would say, the more superior or the best inline head out there. But if you want to change that height to be like the stock, that's my intake. If you would change this to a stock height, then this advantage won't be there, because you're going to end up with a small chambered Windsor head, which a lot of these other castings do have. But this is it, guys. you're looking at what I feel are the 5 best mass production solar hen. The Pro Kings were first started by McLaren, and I heard about this years ago. Gosh, 20 plus years ago. It was invented, first made by McLaren, and it got sold to eventually these guys call them Pro Kings, but they're originally McLaren hens. Anyway, here they are. If you're choosing between these two, do you want big chamber, small chamber? That's your choice. Because if you want big chamber, I would say the Pro King is good. If you want and go by the belief to make good power, you want small chamber, then I go with the SC1 or the Edelbrock SC1, which is superior because it's got a higher port angle than the SC1 over here. Okay, but that is also a higher price, very expensive. But anyway, big chamber, small chamber. Small chamber, let me just do this as a closing remark. Small chamber, great for NA. Big chamber, probably like it for nitrous, because with a bigger chamber. And if you're striving for 14.5 to 1, okay, or higher, and I've seen people do higher numbers than that. I know one particular friend of mine has got a big block Chevy on nitrous, he's got 16.5 to 1. And the way they get away with it is, amazingly, a dome is a friend of a nitrous engine, because the dome acts like a speed bump. Okay, you slow down the traffic or the flame front. If you have some kind of dome in there, it has a tendency to slow down the flame front, because the problem with small chamber on nitrous oxide, since it's such a big combustion enhancer, the flame speed's too fast. You know, like if you run a Yates head small chamber on nitrous, or even turbo or whatever, sometimes this dome is your friend. And like I said, one guy says to me, "Oh, you know, 4-valve engines, they want, you know, flat top, no dome." I go, yes, yes. Endurance, yes, yes. But once you get to the higher level, like my friend, okay, he's got 6.5 to 1 in a big block Chevy, 580 cubic inches. He's got a massive dome because he shoots a lot of nitrous, and I mean a lot. Okay, that much compression is scary, but he knows how to play his dome volume on his chamber and the spark plug position there. It kind of cushions it, of course, also. He has those, you know, he softened up the head. It's like on this one here, when you look at our Prodix and this Blue Thunder, you notice from years ago, I used to do it this way. And I felt it helped, because right off the get-go, we noticed that the mid-range is so much enhanced. And I did this also on a friend's Chevy, injected methanol, and when he shifted his Lyco, now it's pulling the front wheels in second and third gear, which I never did before. No other changes, just this. A lot of people will tell you it probably doesn't work. That's fine, that's their opinion. But my eyes don't lie. We're watching the Camaro take off and the Mustang. Now it's a totally, we had to re-gear, change gears on both of them. All right, because we have too much gear ratio now. The mid-range is just so much stouter, and the top end. Now, if you notice, for many years, this is how I did it. Okay, I know it works to try to keep, notice the light spots there, very light spots. Okay, because that's the lean area. Now, with the new procedure I'm doing, I'm directing my flame directly straight to the lean area. And my purpose for directing it to the lean area, like right here, so that quench becomes a problem at high RPM, at high compression, high RPM. the tight spot here don't burn, okay? Because the passageway is so tight. And the problem with that is there's fuel and there's combustible mixtures still residing in that area at high RPM. Pretty much since the spark plug is here, that's the farthest away. There's a pressure temperature spike, auto ignition starts. So I figured if I can start to burn here, okay, propagates there, but it really didn't fix that. It just helped it clear this area and combust that area so that I can get to that and burn it off. Now I'm more directing straight to the lean area, because my belief is that if you combust that area earlier, okay, once you consume that and turn it to a flame, or flame it up, or ignite it, there's no more temperature pressure spike to be worried about, okay, at high RPM. You want to consume that as fast as you could, here to here, here to here. So if you can put a channel to go in there and consume that lean spot that refuses to light up, okay, because it's a lean condition, it won't light up as quickly, but the pressure and temperature will climb, and boom, you blow the piston, you blow the ring lamp, you blow the corner. That's why you see, and I see it all the time, people say, hey, we burned the intake valve on our big block Chevy or Ford or whatever. What happened? I thought the exhaust was the hotter one. Not really. If you look at this chamber, they're dark. They're very dark. And look at this. This is not cleaned up. See the lean? Okay. So here we are. This helped out. My rich mixture here got consumed and has the flame there to basically propagate towards the very rich area, because everything slams right here, rotate around, and then by the time the fuel ends up right there, guess what? It's mostly air, hardly any fuel. Okay? So I hope this explanation was clear. It's hard sometimes. Like I said, I try to clarify as much as I can. That's why sometimes I make a statement, then I have to go back there and try to explain it further, because sometimes there's a lot of confusion happening. Okay, so I hope this is clear, you guys. And we'll be going up to the dyno with this thing soon. Okay, so I'm in the process of completing this, and it's in a lot of action, but it should still make power, we hope. I feel is the most impressive of all. It's not even this 5 here. It's the Edelbrock SC1, the CFE billet. Of course, those are not castings. CFE is a billet. I've ran them as well. Very impressive. And of course, my ultimate, without really breaking my bank account, is I'll run the hammerhead. I figured that all these canted valve, rotated valve, cannot beat, potentially speaking, a Hemi or a semi-Hemi. For all-out potential like nitro, alcohol, yes, a Hemi would dominate. If I would choose a cylinder head, here it is, hammerhead. I think this is pretty much the ultimate ass cast head, not needing massive surgery to produce the good power, and capable of 500 CFM. Very impressive. Here's the layout. I'd probably raise the intake port a little bit more to get doggone serious about this, but it's got so much potential. These are not my photos. I just got this off the net. And here's the basic layout. Look at the combustion chamber. Pretty good. A lot of people might say that's not a race head. Well, to me, that is a race head. Anything Hemi, semi-Hemi is pretty much race head. There's the CFE. And I flow tested it and pushed out 480, 485 CFM at 28 inches. Very impressive. It's tall, high port, big time. It's a billet.
You can see the port height right there. It's super tall. And here I was setting up to make sure the geometry is good on it before I continue on. Took a picture of it as soon as I was done with it, and off it went to the car. And ran 6 seconds and a quarter mile. At over 227, I think, something like that. It's been long ago.
What I feel is the best. Why did I choose the hammerhead? Because that's the only small block that is out there. And to tell you the truth, I welded, changed the combustion chamber a bit, raised the port quite a bit, through plates like I do here on the Blue Thunder head. Then I would have a full race head. Having a true heavy is the ultimate potential. But if you're running NA, especially for a small block, having some kind of staggered arrangement, a semi-heavy instead of a full heavy, where intake coming in blows through the exhaust and vice versa. Introversion comes back. So it is the Achilles heel of a true heavy, whereas a semi-heavy like the Hammerhead or the Boss 429 is offset a bit, and they put a little bit of cat on the intake valve exhaust so that when it travels in, it doesn't blow straight to the exhaust, and then at the exhaust on the blow down phase or the reversion aspect, you don't want to go up back to the combustion chamber and directly straight to the intake valve and to the intake port. It minimizes that because it's not a straight line shot coming in, intake, exhaust, and back. Okay, it's offset, so you have this. Okay, so it's not gonna, should we say, easily reversion cannot migrate back to the intake port. And also the offset has a little cat. It tends to give it a little bit of a swirl as well as a tumble mixture motion. And I figured that is my choice, the Hammerhead. If I was given a chance to run like a Pro Stock small block like what they did before in NHRA Pro Stock trucks, I would choose that if it was legal in a sense. Because a Hemi or semi-Hemi, not a Hemi, and like I stated on the previous videos, is that almost all Pro Stock heads today are not patterned after the Chrysler Hemi, they're patterned after the Boss 429 semi-Hemi configuration. And the Hammerhead, I believe so, is in the same general layout, so I choose that. But you heard the best, but I want you guys to see what I think about this.